In horror films, people come back from the dead. And sometimes in real life.
I was told it was not my time yet.
Rescuers pull a man from a frozen lake an hour after his heart stops.
It just didn't look like there was any way he was going to come back from that.
They say I would be nothing but a vegetable for the rest of my life if I did survive.
Doctors cut life support to a brain-dead girl.
And I thought when I was out of blink, then she did it again.
I was getting a great view of everything.
A patient watches her own operation on the verge of clinical death.
How would she know that?
How does the human body cheat death? Science solves the mystery of survival against all odds. In a frozen lake hangs a freezing man. At age 31, Ward Krentz is clinically dead.
Not very many people can die and come back.
He had no heartbeat at all. He had what's called asystole, which is what most people call flatline.
Clear Lake, Iowa. A winter playground. 21st of March, 1993. Ward Krentz joins friends on the frozen lake.
We started early afternoon and snowmobile most of the day, in and out of places, riding around the lake. And that day was no exception from any other day.
It was no exception either to find man-made holes in the ice called aerators. Measuring hundreds of meters across, they allow fish to breathe when the lake freezes over.
If the signs aren't posted or it's snowing so bad that you've lost direction of where these aerators are, and they also can be very dangerous.
But it's possible to ride over them.
You have to be going at a pretty high rate of speed and keep the momentum going, because even if you let up for just a second, you're done. It'll go down.
By 10 p.m., they call it a day.
Visibility was getting kind of bad, and it was dark, and we decided we'd had enough and we better head for home. So we were going across, coming back on the last part of our leg there, and we hit open water. When I got to the other side of the open water, I looked back and there was no headlights, no Ward.
I do remember getting close of hitting the water and panicking and just feeling that, this is it.
We listened so to see if we could hear anything out there, and I heard Ward crying out for help, and I could see him splashing around.
But Ward is in open water, out of reach.
You're just thinking that your life's over in a split second. I am a good swimmer, but I know that with heavy water, with heavy snowmobiles outfit and heavy boots, that would be just a matter of seconds to minutes before, and with the cold weather, it won't take long.
For over 10 minutes, Ward fights the cold.
It actually is just like a numbness. And your body freezes up.
Ward loses his struggle.
I thought about my family and friends. What would happen if I was to leave or not to make it? What would they go through?
His heart stops beating. He drifts under the icy water.
We couldn't hear him calling for help anymore, and that's when we made the decision we needed to get some professional help.
At around 10:20 p.m., the Clear Lake Fire Department responds.
Most of the time when you get a cold water rescue call, it's not a good outcome. You know, the people are out on the water for a long time. It doesn't take long to get cold till they basically can't even keep themselves up. We weren't exactly sure where he was at, so we were doing a lot of searching under the edge of the ice. We also used, flashlights, trying to shine across the light to see anything that we possibly could. Hopefully you can hit something or catch onto a piece of clothing and pull the person up.
Ward spends around an hour in the water before they find him.
There was just absolutely no sign of life at all. His eyes were glassed over. His skin was cold and leathery feeling. It just didn't look like there was any way he was going to come back from that.
But they didn't give up hope. Rescuers begin CPR. They perform chest compressions to restart his circulation and try to force air into his lungs.
You know, you train on the mannequins all the time, and people are nothing like mannequins, but he was so cold and just kind of stiff that he felt like the mannequin.
And I could just see he was totally lifeless, and he was blue as gray. I said, well, we lost Ward.
Ward is rushed to Mercy Medical Center, North Iowa, 14 kilometers away.
He looked like a cadaver. He was somewhere between white and blue in color, at least for the immediate presentation. You know, he would appear clinically dead.
Ward has flatlined. His pupils don't react to light, a sign of severe brain injury. His core body temperature measures 18 degrees Celsius, 19 degrees lower than normal. The doctors face a tough choice. Even if they do revive Ward, he could suffer severe brain damage.
I think in this situation that really the bigger decision to be made is, what are your chances of successful recovery? Are you willing to take the risk that, you may not be completely successful, and can you deal with the consequences of having, a young person potentially in a brain damaged or vegetative state? And I asked his family and his friends specifically if there had been any reason that he would not want to be resuscitated, and they said absolutely not.
He's just, full of life. He's young, and I'm sure he wants to live his life out, if there's a chance, even a chance.
We felt that gave us enough to go ahead and, really aggressively resuscitate him.
They can't bring Ward back unless they warm his body and restart his heart. Within 32 minutes of reaching the ER, he's connected to a portable heart-lung machine.
We inserted a tube into the artery, a tube into the vein, and started pumping the blood around. And sort of out with the cold blood, in with the warm. But once you have him hooked to the machine and, the blood's pumping and you're starting to warm, then you really do have to sit and just wait to see what's going to happen.
By now, Ward has been dead for about 2 hours. A window few have crawled back through.
All we did was wait, and they'd just bring us little updates, and it's too soon, it's too early to tell.
Another 12 minutes pass. Finally, the vigil is over.
His pupils started to react. He regained his heartbeat, and he took kind of a single gasping breath. I think we all gasped right after.
After 3 months of rehab, Ward recovers. His long journey back from the grave began under the ice. The very forces that killed him prepared his resurrection. In the frozen waters of Clear Lake, Iowa, Ward Krentz died. Yet after nearly 2.5 hours, doctors brought him back to life. Science unlocks the key to his survival. When he falls into the icy water, the hypothalamus in his brain receives signals about the drop in temperature. Capillaries near the body's surface immediately constrict, sending blood away from the skin to reduce heat loss. Blood courses away from his limbs to his vital organs, which need to be kept supplied with oxygen. Ward is cold and goes into shock. In minutes, his movements become slow and labored. Submerged in the icy water, Ward's body can no longer replenish the heat lost to its surroundings. Below 30 degrees Celsius means cardiac arrest.
The rapidly dropping body temperature causes the heart to fibrillate or beat erratically at first, and then as it gets even colder yet, then the heart just ceases to beat at all and lies still in the chest.
Yet heart failure actually protects him. It keeps him from breathing water into his lungs. It's called dry drowning. 10 to 15% of all drowning cases end this way.
He developed what's called laryngospasm, or a snapping shut of the vocal cords, and so his airway was protected. It was closed at the time.
Dry drowning is the first key to his survival. Ward still has no pulse or respiration. He's clinically dead, but not beyond hope if another vital organ can be saved. His brain is now at risk from cerebral ischemia, a catastrophic chain of chemical reactions that triggers brain cells to die. The result, irreversible brain damage. At room temperature, a heart attack victim has about 6 minutes to be revived before ischemia causes brain death. But the cold water slows down Ward's metabolism, allowing his brain to function for longer. The second key to his survival. He's in a state of suspended animation, but it's not indefinite. It could be his rescue that kills him. He faces a risk called ambient rewarming. Without the protection of the cold, his cells will start to die.
They're in a warm ambulance, they're in a warm hospital. All the protection that you had is basically starting to melt away.
Transferring Ward to the operating room would take too long. Fortunately, this hospital has a portable heart-lung machine, normally used in cardiac surgery. In minutes, he's hooked up. The third key to his survival. The heart-lung machine restores his circulation by pumping blood back around his body. Inside the machine, a heat exchanger slowly raises the temperature of the blood. Erratic rewarming kills cells. Gradual rewarming is the fourth key to Ward's survival. The heart-lung machine also resupplies Ward's blood with oxygen. His cells begin to use oxygen again. Metabolic activity rises. Once the cells are fully restored, they all resume their normal jobs. Life returns. But he's in ventricular fibrillation, a dangerous and erratic heart rhythm.
At that point, we administered a counter shock.
Clear.
Shocked his heart back, and he immediately went into a regular rhythm, which I think made almost everybody in the room sit up and take notice, because at that point we thought, this really might work.
Finally, Ward's core body temperature returns to normal. They remove him from the heart-lung machine. A day later, he regains full consciousness. Mount Olive, North Carolina. Hometown of 16-year-old Candice Ivy, a star pupil who loves the limelight. On December the 2nd, 1994, her life takes a dramatic turn.
I got in my SUV and I was supposed to head to my soccer trials. I only have one brief memory of a few minutes before I got in my Blazer to leave and get on the road.
Candice pulls out from an intersection. She never sees the 40-ton log truck. Her car is struck from the side, her side. When her mother arrives, Candice is still trapped in the wreckage, in critical condition.
They pulled her hair off of the truck wheel. Her head smashed through the glass on her side and actually hit the wheel of the truck.
One of the first to arrive at the scene is fireman Ven Falk.
We couldn't get the door open, so there was really no way to get her out safely. We didn't want to do any more damage than had already been done, so we were trying to get everything stabilized.
It's only then he discovers the victim is Candice Ivy, crowned their Dudley Fire Princess just months earlier.
After I realized it was Candace in the car, my heart dropped. Of course, at that point I was still in the car holding her, so we had to hold our composure and get her out of the car, but after that it was pretty emotional that it was Candace.
When they got her on the stretcher right before they put her in the helicopter, I went over there and I put my hand on her and I said, Candace, I can't go with you, but God will ride with you, and I'll get there as fast as I can.
Candice is airlifted to Pitt County Memorial Hospital 80 kilometers away. Her collarbone and pelvis are broken. But the worst damage is to her head. All the signs point to swelling and bleeding in her brain.
She had raccoon signs, blood accumulating around her eyes, which is indicative of a bad base of the skull fracture, as is the spinal fluid leaking out of her right ear.
The first time I saw Candace in ICU, if they hadn't taken me over to her, or that I didn't recognize her long blonde hair, I would not have known she was my child. I was shocked at how swollen her head was, and her eyes were, I'm not exaggerating, about 2 inches bugged out. The lids just did close over the eyes. I guess there was so much brain pressure.
The trauma has put Candice in a deep coma. Doctors place her on life support. Surgeons cannot reduce the pressure on her brain. They try to treat it with medicine, but without success. Muscle spasms confirm the worst: deep brain injury. The Glasgow scale measures the severity of a coma. 15 is normal consciousness. 3 is irreparable brain damage. Candice is a 4.
I told the family that she was severely brain injured, that she might not survive this. Should she crash, so to speak, I did not think she should be resuscitated, that we might end up with something worse than we even had at that time.
3 days after the accident, Candice's mother goes home. That night, she gets a surprise call from orthopedic surgeon Edwin Cooper. He uses experimental electrostimulation to try to help quadriplegic patients recover movement. The treatment sparks a revolutionary theory, transmitting the same electric signal straight to the brain via the median nerve to revive a coma victim. Dr. Cooper believes his treatment may bring Candice back out of her coma.
That well, sounds kind of hokey to me, but I'm up for anything, if it'll just wake my child up and bring her back to me.
She signed the appropriate consent forms for the university hospital, and I had the device with me, and we placed it on her wrist shortly after midnight.
Dr. Cooper instructs that the electrical cuff be turned on for 12 hours every day. No improvement is seen. By day 6, her condition worsens. The swelling in her brain increases. She's now hit the bottom of the Glasgow coma scale.
It looked like she was brain dead, and her ability to ever make a useful neurological recovery was virtually zero at that point.
I remember them coming in and telling us, assuring us that she was brain dead and that the only thing keeping her alive were the monitors and the respirator and all, and that we had a decision to make. I remember it not being a hard decision for me. She wanted to live life. She's used to tap dance even down the malls, and just was my little bubbly one that would just burst into a room so full of energy, so full of excitement, and I knew she just couldn't, she wouldn't want to live like that. When Candace was taking off the respirators, I asked them if I could crawl in bed and hold her. I said, I brought her into this world and I just couldn't see her leaving without her mama being with her. They just left us there for a few minutes, and I had been told that it could be very quick. It could be as much as 30 seconds to 30 minutes.
It isn't quick. The next morning, with no life support, Candice is still breathing.
When she didn't just pass away peacefully, then I really felt like that we needed to push harder to see if what kind of recovery we could get back.
Dr. Cooper suggests giving electrical stimulation another try. No one else sees signs of hope, except her mother.
I just kept on and I said, Candace, I have to have some sign. I have to know this is okay. And I said, if it's okay, blink. And she did. And I thought, well, now, is that a blink just because the eyes needed to blink, or is that a blink because she's hearing me? So I asked her again, and she did it again. And eventually she started slitting her eyes open, and then her eyes started tracking me in the room. If I walked from the left side to the right side of the room, her eyes would follow me.
Voluntary movements? The doctors can't say. Then, a month after the accident, there's a breakthrough.
I said, well, how many pigs were there in that little story about the pigs with the houses? And she flexed 3 fingers. And so I knew that we would have success.
I'm ready. Are you ready? Okay.
Now, it's Candice's turn to struggle. She has to learn to live again. Brain injury leaves her with the coordination of an infant and the temperament of a child.
In rehab, I dressed her and fed her and washed her and all the things that mamas do. I just raised her again. I raised her twice.
Nearly 2 months after expecting her daughter to die, Elaine takes Candice home.
The day we brought her home was a very joyous event. There was a great big party in the home. The Dudley Fire Department showed up. They had the fire trucks and the lights going on.
For Candice, this is the day her memory returns.
They let me ride on the fire truck and pull up down the street to my house and pull in the driveway of my house where there was massive amounts of people, and it was just overwhelming. It was, of course, mighty exciting. I didn't really understand what had happened to me at that time, so I didn't know why all the people were around and why all my friends were there. I remember I was hanging my head and crying, and I kept saying, for me, I can't believe it, for me.
That's when, I guess, more reality set into me, because that's when I realized just how far we had to go, because she didn't act normal, she didn't speak normal, she didn't look normal, and the friends were very kind to begin with, but also you could read their eyes and know that Candace didn't look like Candace to them anymore. Very, very good. Okay.
Candice is a shadow of her former self.
learning to walk, learning to talk, learning how to hold my fork right, learning how to do everything again was such an overwhelming task. I would never, ever want to face something like that again.
I remember one time she asked me, why did I plug her back in? She says, I wished you hadn't. And I said, well, until you're the mama, you don't know what that decision's like. She wished at times that she had passed on because life was hard.
In the end, Candice sees her mother was right. 5 years after waking from her coma, she gets her degree in therapeutic recreation. Today, she works with elderly patients. Her comeback from brain death is a mystery only science can unravel. She survived a crash, a coma, and a near-fatal brain injury. The story of her death-defying comeback begins inside her head. Trauma from the crash causes edema or swelling of her brain. The swollen tissue presses up against her skull. Brain cells start to die. The force of the impact has also torn axons in her brain, the long nerve fibers that transmit electrical messages between nerve cells. Up to 90% of patients with such damage remain in a persistent vegetative state. Candice is in a deep coma. Without life support, her heart should fail. But she lives through the night. Though her brain is damaged, her heart is young and strong, the first key to her survival. The second key, Dr. Cooper. In his work with quadriplegic patients, Cooper discovered that electrical stimulation of one arm triggered movement of the other. He deduced the electrical signal was traveling up through the brain. The cuff transmits an electrical signal 40 times a second along the right median nerve. Thousands of pulses an hour every day for 3 weeks.
It's really 10 million pulses that they receive in that 3-week protocol, and so that is like just somebody telling you to wake up 10 million times, and it seems to work.
Nerve cells called neurons carry the signal directly through the brainstem and up to the thalamus. The signal is believed to stimulate the part of the brain that controls breathing. It may also increase cerebral blood flow. From the thalamus, the signal passes to the cerebral cortex. This part of the brain controls cognitive function, the ability to think, sense, feel, and interpret one's environment. Signals from the electrical cuff may stimulate the growth of new axons, the long nerve fibers that transmit messages between neurons. These may build bridges between damaged areas of the cerebral cortex. The third key to Candice's survival. After 3 weeks of electrical stimulation, Candice begins to show signs of recovery. She talks more. Her movements improve. She follows simple commands. As she improves, Dr. Hardy can finally operate. He drains the buildup of fluid inside her skull. This relieves the pressure on her brain. The fourth key to her survival.
I try to remain honest that some people do wake up from what appears to be a hopeless brain injury without the benefit of my intervention with the electrical stimulation. I still think that the person's odds are twice as good of waking up and maybe twice as short a time on the respirator if they have the electrical stimulation.
Something else increased Candice's chances.
My family, my mom has never given up on me, and she didn't give up on me in the hospital, and that's because of her love. That's why I think I'm here.
It's one thing to come back from death's door, another to describe what it's like. Ask Pam Reynolds.
I began to go further and further with the light into the light where the light was.
as doctors kill Pam to save her life. She has an out-of-body experience right before the eyes of science. No one can predict the day they will die. Except Pam Reynolds. She's about to undergo life-saving surgery. Only first, her surgeons must kill her.
All any of us heard was, "We're going to stop your heart." I think that was enough. We didn't want to know anymore.
Yet she does know more, while she's dead. Atlanta, Georgia, August 1991. Life is peachy for Pam Reynolds, a singer-songwriter and co-owner of a recording studio. But in 1991, she was singing a different tune.
I had had horrible headaches. They were real severe, excruciating. The longer they went on, the worse they became. I began to lose the ability to speak. I would forget how to form language.
A CAT scan reveals a swollen blood vessel in her brain, a basilar artery aneurysm.
It was evening when the CAT scan was finished, and I thought the doctor was closed for the day. But no, the laboratory sent me immediately back to his office. So instinctively I knew this was not good news.
It's a time bomb that could go off at any moment. If it does, it will mean death or paralysis. Her doctors can't defuse it. The aneurysm is buried in one of the most inaccessible parts of her brain.
The aneurysm was so large and it was located in the brainstem. It was considered no man's land. No one operated there.
But this man does. Dr. Robert Spetzler, director of Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, Arizona.
When an aneurysm blows, half the patients die, and of those that survive, half of them never return to being normal. So it's a real threat.
The only way to defuse the aneurysm is a rare surgical procedure called hypothermic cardiac standstill. Doctors use a heart-lung machine to induce hypothermia and slow down the metabolism until the heart stops. The result? Clinical death. With the body in temporary suspended animation, surgeons cut blood flow to the brain, reducing the risk of hemorrhage as they operate.
There's a certain amount of trepidation to put a patient's brain to sleep, to shut it down metabolically, to cool it off, to provide absolutely no blood flow to the brain or the rest of the organs after it's cooled to a certain level. It's fascinating and kind of terrifying.
The operation carries a 25% chance of failure, including death.
There was no question in our minds whether or not to do this because it was the final option. There were no other options available to us.
Days later, Pam meets her appointment with death.
I remember driving to the hospital. The light in Phoenix, as you know, is very bright, blinding, piercing. I had a terrible headache on that day. It was awful. It was just flat on my back, ceiling, and a few people around me. And anesthesia, and then nothing.
For the next 7 hours, a medical team of 20 will hold Pam's life in their hands. Speakers placed in both ears emit clicks picked up by the auditory nerve center in her brainstem. The clicks register on an electrogram. When the readout flatlines, it signals her brain has shut down.
You're starting off by opening the head, taking a big powerful microscope and crawling down the crevices of the brain to get near the aneurysm. If the aneurysm bursts at that point in time, you have zero control because you haven't started the cardiac standstill.
As Spetzler nears the aneurysm, other surgeons connect Pam to a heart-lung machine. The machine begins to cool her blood and induce hypothermia. Her core body temperature drops below 24 degrees Celsius. Cardiac arrest. The last signs of life. Her heart quivers with random traces of electrical activity. Surgeons stop the heart completely with potassium chloride, the same drug used on death row. Pam is clinically dead. Her core body temperature measures 15 degrees Celsius. Her brainstem has stopped responding. Surgeons drain blood from her body. The damaged blood vessel empties, and so does the aneurysm, like a water balloon collapsing. Now the trickiest part. Dr. Spetzler clips off the damaged aneurysm, which allows blood to flow through the vessel normally. He has mere minutes. The longer Pam is dead, the less chance of bringing her back to life. No work could be more delicate.
You are in a very, very, very tight space, and the blood vessels, because now they are depleted of blood, will look like little white, almost invisible strands. Any one of those little blood vessels, if it's inadvertently caught in the clip, can cause a profound stroke.
With the vessel repaired, the heart-lung machine is used to re-warm Pam's body until her heart shows signs of life. Surgeons must correct an erratic rhythm. After 6 hours and 55 minutes, she's taken to recovery. The next day, Pam comes to. Yet something bizarre happened on the operating table. The only witness is the person who couldn't see.
I began to hear a noise, and it was a guttural noise.
A noise a professional singer can describe.
And it pitched out as a natural D, and it was like a frequency, a road. And it's almost like I could feel a suction sensation at the top of my head. And then I was out, looking down at the body. I was getting a great view of everything. Vision was crystal clear. The sound was more perfect than I've ever heard it before and probably will ever hear it again. I looked down and saw an instrument in Dr. Spetzler's hand. And it seemed to have different interchangeable bits of some kind in it. And also, someone was doing surgery in the groin area.
Then she sees herself shocked back to life.
And I felt a jolt to the body. And it was very much like dropping into a swimming pool that was full of ice water. It hurt.
In recovery, Pam shared her visions.
My caregivers around me, while my family laughed and we kidded, they weren't all laughing. It seemed to make them a little bit nervous.
No wonder. Everything she described was accurate.
When it comes to the whole issue of consciousness in the brain, all bets are off.
Science can shed light on the mystery. But Pam saw something else that will leave science in the shadows. To remove a brain aneurysm, Pam Reynolds chose radical surgery. Doctors induced clinical death to save her life. Pam not only survived, she watched it happen.
And this experience remains clear. It's day after day, year after year. It doesn't fade, it doesn't become foggy.
The explanation may start where the operation begins, with anesthesia. Soon after she goes under, Pam's recollections start. She recalls a high-pitched sound, right down to the note.
This high-speed pneumatic drill that we use, called the Midas Rex, has a very, very high pitch to it, and it's very, very distinct. How would she know that?
She not only recalls distinct sound, but distinct speech, later corroborated by the surgical team.
I heard a conversation, and a female voice was saying, "We have a problem. Her arteries are too small."
Why would she have this kind of information if she was so deeply under barbiturate infusion of medications that should be shutting down her brain?
There were already lots and lots of barbiturates in place, where the brain was already in a very, very deep comatose condition.
Barbiturates are a powerful sedative, part of the cocktail of drugs used in general anesthesia. But anesthesia is not an exact science. Every patient can react differently to the combination of drugs. Of every 1,000 people who are put under, 1 or 2 recall conversations during surgery. At this stage, the sound may have aroused Pam's sedated mind, but in this case, it's unlikely. Even more extraordinary, she hears the conversation despite constant noise. Pam not only hears, she sees, with her eyes taped shut.
I was getting a great view of everything. Vision was crystal clear.
She describes Dr. Spetzler drilling into her head. From the conversation around her, she may have mentally reconstructed the action.
She really sort of had a bird's-eye view of what was going on. Now, whether that image came from somewhere else that she then internalized somehow, I don't think there's any way to tell. But it was sort of intriguing with how well she described what she shouldn't have been able to see.
What she remembers seeing and hearing during her surgery seemed very real to her. But Pam's visions took her beyond out-of-body scenes, to a place where science can't follow. A near-death experience, with the classic image.
I saw a tiny little pinpoint of light, and the light began to get bigger and bigger until it was large enough pretty much to engulf everything, and it began to pull me. My favorite way of describing going in through the tunnel and toward the light is as a train ride. It's like looking out of the window of a very rapidly moving train and catching bits and pieces of scenery and tiny little microcosms of life.
From a scientific perspective, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. This is one time when the brain is in a state where we have shut off metabolism as much as can be shut off and still be able to bring that brain back to function normal.
These visions may have formed any time between anesthesia and clinical death. Cells never stop working all at once. Like a flickering light bulb, Pam's brain may have continued to function for a while, even after it flatlined. It's happened before. Studies show 1 in 5 victims of heart attacks reports near-death experiences. Across age, race and gender, there are similar accounts. Victims often describe hallucinations. The trigger may be hypoxia, a lack of oxygen to the brain. But Pam's case is different.
When the heart is no longer beating and the lungs no longer can give oxygen, then you're receiving oxygen from the heart-lung machine. So, in this case, the brain is never hypoxic.
Some scientists speculate a near-death experience can be triggered by the fear of death, or the actual process of dying. In anticipation, the body may even produce a flood of endorphins, biochemical compounds produced by the pituitary gland. Natural painkillers, they create a sense of well-being. Pam's visions may have been a self-defense mechanism to ease the passage of death. It's all theory. Without facts, science is stumped.
The brain is an incredible organ, and I think we have just barely scratched the surface of understanding what it does, what it's capable of.
Death has been called the Big Sleep. It's also the Big Mystery, a medical frontier whose boundaries keep shifting.
It's 16 years later. I am still groping with trying to understand it. I think that this is probably not the final destination of death, but maybe a place in between.
A place few visit. The border between life and death remains a wilderness of knowledge.